The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
Valley, hooey Hollywood, where any office boy or young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking pan. And any barmaid can be a star maid if she dances with or without a plan. Hooray for Hollywood, where you're terrific if you're even good, where anyone at all from Shirley Temple to Amy Semple is equally understood. Go out and try your luck.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast, Damn You Hollywood. And here's your host. He's been mistreated. He's been abused. He's been struck down, haunted, baby. He's been confused. Because I know, yes, I know, Robert Winfree's been mistreated. Since his baby left him, he's been losing his mind. Yes, he has. Ladies and gentlemen, the mistreated Robert Winfree. Yay!
Wait, is that 9:40 at our start time? Man, I was joking about the time dilation effect of this film, but here we are later than usual, and we blame Martin Scorsese for that, everybody.
Blame whatever power hit my fucking house and logged me out of everything, and me having to... This operation, this finely tuned machine that everyone thinks runs so smoothly, is actually being held together by scotch tape and bubble gum. And it took me this long between dropping my daughter off at home after I took her to choir, getting set up, and then realizing I have none of my logins because they all belong to my partner. Not that kind of partner, you perverts. My podcast partner.
Business partner.
Yeah, it's my business partner. So I'm like, hey, I've logged out of everything. Send me everything. And like trying to get everything all set up. And so, yes, we're 40 minutes late. But that's not why Robert's been mistreated. He's been mistreated. Yeah. Oh, God. Normally my karaoke is better than that. But I am sick here. But that doesn't stop me. It doesn't stop me, Robert Winfree of the Screaming Boy podcast.
Dude, cancer didn't stop you. I imagine a little chest cold won't.
No, nothing stops me. I am the juggernaut of podcasts.
Minor bits of evidence to the contrary, but we'll leave that aside.
What are we talking about tonight? Mistreated?
We referenced it a little bit earlier, but Martin Scorsese released a thing.
Scorsese zipped down his pants and showed everyone his thing, his really long thing, his longer than normal thing.
We are talking about Martin Scorsese's latest sweeping American crime epic, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yes! Killers of the Flower Moon is a 2023 American epic revisionist Western crime drama film. Co-produced and directed by Uncle Martin Scorsese, who co-wrote the screenplay with Eric Roth based on the 2017 book of the same name by David Grann. Its plot centers on a series of Oklahoma murders in the Osage Nation during the 1920s, committed after oil was discovered on tribal land. Leonardo DiCaprio, Robert De Niro, and Lily Gladstone lead an ensemble cast that includes Jesse Plemons, Tantoo Cardinal, John Lithgow.
It includes freaking me. All right, that's how long the cast. Everybody's on this. Everybody's
and Brendan Fraser. It is the sixth feature film collaboration between Scorsese and DiCaprio, and the 10th between Scorsese and De Niro, and the 11th and final collaboration between Scorsese and his musical partner, Robbie Robertson, who died 2 months before the film's release. The film is dedicated to Robertson. Killers of the Flower Moon premiered at the 76 Cannes Film Festival on May 20th and was released in the United States this past week and then by Apple TV under the Apple Original Films label, and by Paramount Pictures. It was screened in IMAX. It is set for an unspecific streaming release date on Apple TV Plus. The film received positive reviews. All right, so that's what we're doing here tonight.
Indeedy.
we've often joked about
Mhm.
Martin Scorsese. We're gonna land on Scorsese's head. Specifically when we did The Irishman, which I made us do.
You
It
did.
was the talk of the town at one point.
It
And then
was
I
the
made us do
something
it.
of the town.
And then I made us do it for St. Patrick's Day because I thought it would be amusing.
Because racism.
Yes, absolutely because of stereotypes.
Ethnic stereotypes. Never mind that, most of the people in that movie are Italian.
Yeah, don't let the name fool you.
Here's Pesci. Here's Pacino.
But I'll tell you, and it launched a running gag about the length of that movie and how long it took and blah 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 blah. But I'm looking at some of the other Scorsese films here, and I'll tell you, I mean, the man has done more good than bad. I mean, we all love Taxi Driver, right?
Well, love's a
Yes.
strong word.
Taxi Driver. I mean, let's hash this out for a few minutes for TikTok purposes. Taxi Driver is a classic. I think it's the one that, I don't know. Would you say, other than Goodfellas, I would say it's the other one that when people think of Martin Scorsese, that's the one they think of.
Probably. Again, like, I don't love it, but you're
Mm-mm.
an idiot if you don't respect it.
Yeah. Taxi Driver, for those that may not know this, has definitely been part of the American cultural film fabric for excuse me, for decades. I mean, that's where we get the you looking at me, you looking at me, looking at you, looking at me,
Are you talking to me?
you talking to me. Which, despite my fucking that up, has been quoted ad nauseum for films for decades, and it came from that movie. It obviously hit home with people. It certainly made De Niro a household name. We have Raging Bull, that came out in 1980. The King of Comedy came out in 1982. And I don't think a lot of people know about the King of Comedy, but it gets referenced when it gets referenced when talking about the Joker movie from a few years back. That
It's sort of a spiritual sequel.
Yeah, Joker, I think, borrows liberally from, among other things, the King of Comedy.
It does.
So you have that, and then you have The Color of Money, The Last Temptation of Christ, which annoyed a lot of people. Then you have Goodfellas.
Hang on. So, Color of Money, very good movie. The Last Temptation of Christ, you said it annoyed a lot of people, and I believe the only, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody out there on the network, I believe I'm the only like seriously practicing religious member of our little conglomeration here.
I mean, there are that West Virginia, Ohio contingent that identify as Christians, but I don't know how serious they're practicing anything.
I'd have to ask. So this is, and for the record, I say that not to as an establishment of like what I'm about to say it kind of helps if it comes from someone who's not, like maliciously atheistic or something, right?
Go on.
There is one of the things I appreciated about The Last Temptation of Christ is it's not nearly as it's not dismissive or offensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's not accurate, but it's not. Well, hang on. But it's not trying to be. It's trying to be an exploration of theme. It's trying to be an exploration of, Martin Scorsese approaches that movie and the story the story that he wants to tell there with a lot of seriousness and with a lot of thought put into what's happening. He didn't just, slapdash stuff at the screen. I'm not saying you have to like it. I'm saying there's a lot of people who got very upset because they're very sensitive about the crucifixion, and for good reason, mind you. If you take that seriously, and I do, I'm not a big fan of mockery of it. I think it speaks poorly of a society and a lot of people involved. At the same time, I'm not quite to the point with my life at the moment where I'm throwing fecal matter at everybody when they make a good faith effort to approach something complicated like that. And I tend to think Scorsese approached it in good faith. You may not like it, and that's fine.
Let
But
me
this
let me
isn't
throw this out there.
hang on, but like this
Yeah.
isn't, something insulting or demeaning like, say, the invention of lying.
I think for some people, and I don't want to get too far into this, but I'll spend a minute. It's just the two of us tonight, so if we go a little tangential, it's not the worst thing ever. I think for some people, for many people actually, when something is precious to them, they seem to want to protect it from any kind of criticism, from any deconstruction. Maybe because they're not bright enough, talented enough, thoughtful enough to defend it. Maybe because they just, it's so powerful for them, it's so meaningful for them that they can't imagine it as anything but the most perfect thing ever. I don't, we talked about this a little bit last week with The Exorcist Believer. I don't mock people for believing. I don't mock institutional religion. That was what I was trying to say last week with, talking about my dad. My dad's whole thing is you should just be good people without having to depend on a structured religion to guide you. And I said, that's great for you. I'm glad you are made of moral, sterner stuff that you can walk the path of the righteous without the belief. Many people can't. Many people, left to their own devices, devolve into amoral relativism at best. At worst, so much worse.
Yeah, you said at best. At worst, see the catastrophe of the 20th century.
So my point being, with the last temptation of Christ, I think it's an absolutely valuable thing to look at Christ and look at him from a humanistic perspective. And for some people, that's way too much. You are taking something that is the foundation of their ability to walk a moral and right path to the best of their ability, and saying it's not the most perfect thing you think it is, and them going, well, if it's not, I don't know what I'm doing here. That's tough for some people. It's tough for a lot of people, and I think that's where that movie tends to peg them, is they don't want to have to consider that the very thing that they're leaning on is imperfect.
I think part of the other problem that people had with it is, and this is a weird bit of it, but because Scorsese approaches it so earnestly, they can't dismiss it out of hand.
Right. It's not something maybe.
Well, hang on. There's a perfect corollary here.
Okay.
I assume you've seen The Life of Brian, right?
I have absolutely seen The Life of Brian.
Okay. Infinitely more deliberately offensive, right? Like that
Sure.
movie is trying to be what it is. But because it's comedic in tone, it's relatively easy to dismiss. Like,
yeah, sure. It's the Monty Python guys being silly. And while they may have been taking an editorial pot shot at Christianity, it's easy to then say, yes, but these are the, Ministry of Silly Walks guys. I'm not listening to that.
And it's equally easy to kind of dismiss the, not even comedic, but like the deliberately antagonistic, the stuff that acts in bad faith. Again, that stuff's pretty easy to just kind of go, whatever. Again, you're not acting in good faith. I don't care. I don't have to listen to this. Scorsese in that movie strikes this really weird balance where he's taking Christianity seriously. He's taking the teachings in the Bible seriously, and he kind of monkeys with it a little bit in terms of, again, approaching Jesus from at least a partially human perspective. And there's a lot of people, like you said, that struggle with that a little bit, but they struggled with that movie, I think, more than others, in no small part because it's not trying to make fun of you for your belief system.
Right.
Trying to explore it, and in some ways that might even be worse for some people.
No, absolutely. They have Goodfellas, and Goodfellas is is
another
probably,
one.
I mean, if it's not the artistic height of Scorsese, it's certainly, I think, Scorsese at his most identifiably pop culture.
Yeah, to this point.
Certainly from here, Scorsese will be known for the mob picture. He's certainly not going to be known for The Last Temptation of Christ or for Taxi Driver. He's going to be known for Goodfellas because, people who don't know Scorsese will think this is like his first movie. And, Goodfellas has lived in the American zeitgeist since it came out back in 1990. It's the one everyone references. There have been so many imitators after this, including Scorsese himself. Goes back to the well on this one too many times.
At least.
It is quintessentially the modern Scorsese movie.
Yeah.
You have Cape Fear, The Age of Innocence, and then my personal favorite Scorsese of all time, Casino. And
okay, two things.
Yes.
One, his remake of Cape Fear that's incredible. If you've never seen, because the original Cape Fear, especially for the time period, stars Gregory Peck and Robert Mitchum. I blanked on his name. Could see his face. Blanked on his name for a minute there. The original, especially for its time, as a product of the time when it was made, is interesting. His remake takes the same themes and amplifies them in all the ways that a Scorsese kind of picture does. If you haven't seen it, definitely worth your time to check out. If you had asked me to guess your favorite Scorsese flick, I probably would have gone Casino. That is very much right up your alley, and I don't mean that insultingly.
I love Casino. De Niro as sort of the reluctant gambling casino boss is fantastic. Joe Pesci as
Pesci's always great.
Yeah, Joe Pesci is fantastic. Some of the stuff he does in that movie, again, Joe Pesci often imitated, can never quite be duplicated. He really brings it in Casino, and it's funny that he's kind of a villainous character, but he's not somebody that, and when he gets his in the end, you're like, yeah, he absolutely deserves it, but you almost still feel bad for him. Like, it's the great thing about Scorsese, and specifically in Casino, is the shades of gray every character is painted with. And even Sharon Stone, who is I've often brought up the Adrian scale, the nagging, horrible wife.
We're familiar with that particular scale.
Yeah, Sharon Stone's not even on it. Sharon Stone is as far as horrible movie wife, is on another fucking level. I mean, she's great.
It takes some effort to break that particular scale, and boy did she.
Oh yeah, Sharon Stone fucking hit the blimp. She just knocked it out of the park. She's so good at making you wish you would be hit by a truck. Like, she is. I mean, you see her point of view. This is the beauty of Scorsese. You see her point of view. You understand where she's coming from. You know why she ended up where she did. This is everyone mark this on your bingo card. This is Larry Gilliard's character from The Wire. Or at the very end, he's talking about you get into the drug game because your father did, and your grandfather did, and your great grandfather did, and you do it because that's what your family does, and that's how everyone makes a living, and that's how we keep the fortune rolling in. And then you stop when you can't breathe anymore, and the walls have closed in, and there's just nowhere for you to go, and then you just get and you just let the game crush you. That's very much Sharon Stone's kind of story in Casino. It's like, I got together with this guy and I did all the things I was supposed to do, but to not have autonomy, to not have a life of my own, to be utterly controlled by by this man and the mob and and the casinos, it just crushes who I'm supposed, who I want to be. And of course she reacts poorly to it and makes every wrong decision possible, but who wouldn't when you don't have a strong moral fiber and your whole life is closing in on you. And she explodes in glorious violence. It's fantastic. She's so good. She is absolutely fantastic. But by the end of it, you're like, much like Joe Pesci's character, you're like, I'm glad you're dead. But I feel kind of bad for you. Yeah, absolutely. That Casino is one of the few movies I'll watch repeatedly. The old movie to put on before you go to bed at night, that you've seen 1,000 times. I don't have a lot of those, but especially if it's not a Marvel or a Star Wars. But Casino is one of them. And then you have Kundun, which I've never seen. Then Bringing Out the Dead, which Ronnie and I are going to talk about next year when we look at some Nick Cage movies. Bringing Out the Dead was interesting.
Yeah. One of the interesting things about the long view of Scorsese's career is, while he definitively has a style and he has themes that are fairly resonant across, again, the entire breadth of it, he's not afraid at times, and even at this point in his career when he's 80, to dip his toe into something more experimental. And
yeah, he's very much like, I talked about this with Wes Anderson. He kind of looks at a thing and goes, I want to talk about this now. And he's kind of like the annoying autistic person at a party. It was like, he now wants to tell you, corner you in a room and tell you about his new favorite thing. And you're like, go away. But that's Wes Anderson. You tell Wes Anderson to go away. Martin Scorsese is like the old man at the party with the same problem, but he weaves such an interesting tale. You're like, you're like, telling me more, crazy old man, about your new interest in paramedics. Because that's Bringing Out the Dead for me. It's like, I want to talk about what it's like to be a paramedic and how that affects you mentally, what you go through. I want this to be sort of a metaphor for dealing with death. And I'm going to have Nick Cage in the lead. And you're just like, tell me more. I would like to sign up for your newsletter, Martin Scorsese. Wes Anderson, go away.
I'll be hang on. First of all, be a little bit nicer to Wes Anderson.
No.
Be nicer to Wes Anderson. He's got some genuinely interesting films.
Me and Michael Bay are going to push Wes Anderson down a flight of stairs.
Look, man. This is my warning to you, and I mean,
oh my God.
If I ever see you and Michael Bay in the same place at the same time, we're done.
One bullet, two deaths.
No. You don't get the sweet release of death.
Oh my God.
No, you and me are done. That's it.
Okay.
Over.
I heard you loud and clear. I'll have to cancel my date with Michael Bay. Yeah, so that's
unless the purpose of your date is to secretly poison him, in which case I wholeheartedly support your endeavor.
And then in 2002, we get the modern Scorsese.
Yeah.
Like 2002 is where he really crosses the Rubicon into what we now know as the Scorsese movie, which gets us to Killers of the Flower Moon. And it begins with Gangs of New York. Gangs of New York is approximately 22 hours long.
And it's not longer than The Irishman. Hang on.
That's 6 weeks long.
I agree that Gangs of New York is overlong. That's a very fair complaint about that film. Here's the other thing about Gangs of New York, which I enjoy. There's a lot about that movie I appreciate.
Sure, it's a great movie. I'm picking at it, but it is definitely the model for the modern Scorsese, including its length. Yeah,
its length. He always seems to have one casting choice that doesn't make sense. In this case, it's Cameron Diaz.
It's 2002, and she was the it girl at the time.
I'm not saying there's not logic behind how we get here. I'm saying even taken on its own terms, like there's always someone who doesn't fit. And for as good as a lot of the cast is in that movie, if you don't have Daniel Day-Lewis as Bill the Butcher, that whole thing falls apart. Every single bit of it.
I tell you what, Leonardo DiCaprio, known for Basketball Diaries and Romeo and Juliet, and he was a pretty face, and I don't think anyone really took him seriously as an actor, though, as an actor's actor.
I have mentioned this before. So you mentioned 2002. There are two movies predominantly starring Leonardo DiCaprio in a lead role that released in 2002. Two of them. One, as you already mentioned, is Gangs of New York. So he worked opposite Daniel Day-Lewis along with Martin Scorsese. The other one is Catch Me If You Can, where he's opposite Tom Hanks, directed by Steven Spielberg. I say this to say the following, okay? If you need to understand how the shoddy state of Leonardo DiCaprio's career post Titanic, like we're too far removed from Titanic for that to be its own thing anymore, but nobody takes him seriously as an actor. To rehab his image in the same year, he had to work with Scorsese and Spielberg opposite two all-time great acting talents. And God bless him, it worked. It saved his career. but
Yeah,
that's what he had to do.
Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio, and we're going to talk about this with Killers of the Flower Moon, utterly underrated and underappreciated. I talked about Meryl Streep on our review of Only Murders in the Building.
Catastrophically overrated.
Easy. I said of Meryl
I will
Streep.
stand by that.
You can stand on your head. Meryl Streep, I think, is one of the great living, one of the greatest living actresses of our time, modern times. I think she's phenomenal. Leonardo DiCaprio, I don't think it's enough credit for how amazing an actor he is, and I would put him up there with Meryl Streep in that. I said of Meryl Streep at the time, and so I'm going to repeat it.
There's no way he'd ever be seen with a woman that much older than him. If you're not 25, he's not interested.
What I love and both hate about this moment is if it was for me, you'd be going, hang on, your knickers would be in a twist, your nipples would be twisting, and you'd be like, no. I'm trying. No. I'm Robert Winfree, and I must make a salient point. I don't want to have to deal with this rube, this boob, making jokes, this clown. I, Robert Winfree, the great Oz, have to make an important point for the people of TikTok to hear me within a 10-minute time frame. But it's me now trying to make the point, and you have to be the boob, and it's okay.
Well, somebody has to bring levity to this podcast. At the moment, it's me.
Wonderful. I enjoy our seesaw banter. Anyway, the point that I was trying to make is acting is more than just a recitation of lines.
Yeah.
It's more than just following your blocking and, reacting to the invisible green monster that, someone's telling you about.
Somebody has a tennis ball on the end of a pole and say, look at this. Pretend it's this thing.
We're going to talk about this more with Killers of the Flower Moon, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But if you go back to Gangs of New York, there are things Leonardo DiCaprio is doing with his face, his body, while he gives the lines. He gives a full-bodied, full-throated performance. That's acting. He is absolutely able to stand across from Daniel Day-Lewis, and Daniel Day-Lewis is hitting him with everything he's got, and Leonardo DiCaprio is catching every ball and throwing it back. He's not missing a beat. I'll tell you, when you have the finest of fine actors working with an auteur like Martin Scorsese, it creates film that makes us want to spend hours away from our families and friends to talk about this stuff. When people ask me, why do you do a podcast about movies? I do it because of Scorsese. I do it because of Quentin Tarantino. I do it because there are people out there creating art that's worth talking about. And the people who carry the ball, the people who create those performances are a part of that art. And I can't say enough good, starting with Gangs of New York, I can't say enough good things about Leonardo DiCaprio. I mean, yes, it's easy to point to Daniel Day-Lewis, who's phenomenal, and be like, it was all him. Nope. He was right there. Daniel Day, what do you call it? For every move that Daniel Day-Lewis did, there was Leonardo DiCaprio right there to compliment him.
It's true, but part of the reason I say that without Daniel Day-Lewis, that movie falls apart. My brother echoing one of my long-held points about Romeo and Juliet, believe it or not, that it's a dark comedy, not a tragedy.
Yes, given the state, given my dating history for the past year, I would call it a dark comedy.
Mine is just the wasteland, so don't worry about it. At least yours provides a few laughs. My point there about Daniel Day-Lewis is as follows. DiCaprio at that point in time in his career, he clearly, you can see what he wants to accomplish. He needed the right guy opposite him to draw that out of him at that point in time. He's not quite to the point in his career where he can do what he did in that movie opposite pretty much anyone.
I don't want to go too much on a tangent here, but that is really what directing is all about. Directing is more than just creating. It's more than what George Lucas thinks it is. And it's more than what's her nuts from Eternals and
Chloe Zhao.
Chloe Zhao seems to think it is. Directing is not just about creating a technical scene, blocking, moving things, and figuring out what angles to shoot stuff at. It's also about getting the best performance out of your actors. It's knowing what you have with your actors and going, how do it's an odd reference, but it's one I make pretty often. It's not The Wire, I promise. It's the other one I do all the time. It's the scene in the made-for-TV movie about Def Leppard where they're trying to get the singer of Def Leppard to hit the high notes for Photograph, and he doesn't think he can do it. And the producer goes, "No, you can. And what you have a beautiful sound in you if we can just get it out." And and he's struggling, and finally he just goes for it and just out comes this majesty that becomes the song Photograph. And that's what a director does. Because a lot of times the actors don't even know what they have in them. But that's, and I know you're going to like throw a chair at me, but like Spike Lee also is really, really good about getting the best performances out of the players that he has. I know famously the Bamboozled line about, Damon Wayans wanting to do X and like, I want to do this accent. And Spike Lee's like, no, Damon. Good directors, not the one idiot that did the third X-Men movie that we all hate. Not Bryan Singer, the other one.
Wasn't that Singer?
Brett Ratner.
Oh yeah, the old Ratnertron 3000.
Yeah, so there's
Brett Ratner currently being uploaded to the terrible like director GPT.
Yeah.
When
you just want to make a movie for cheap, call Brett Ratner.
The DGA is the next one that's about to strike when they realize that thing's coming online and AI is coming for the director's chair.
But when you want somebody who can take their resources and pull something beautiful out of it, that's where you get that's where the best directors come in. That's where you have a Scorsese. So anyway, you have The Aviator, The Departed, which I don't know. I don't think I've actually seen The Departed, but I feel like now every like film bro has been referencing The Departed as of late. And I don't know why I think that, but
it's about the 20-year mark. It's not quite 20 years since The Departed, but it's about there. That's the one that finally got Scorsese his Oscar for Best Director.
Okay.
The Departed, I'm occasionally on the fence about whether or not it's better than the material it is adapting. It's based pretty seriously on is it a Hong Kong movie? It's some Korea, Japanese, one of those. I forget again. I forget. I apologize. Called Infernal Affairs. So it's based heavily on that, but yeah, I like The Departed just fine. It's a very good movie. You've got another big ensemble cast full of very, very talented performances.
All right, and then we have Shutter Island, Hugo, and the one modern people now know because we've been talking about like a lot of historical Scorsese, but I think like recent film people, this is the one everyone thinks of, and it's The Wolf of Wall Street. And don't get me wrong, I think The Wolf of Wall Street, dealing with life after the 2008 financial collapse, I mean, it's right up there with The Big Short. I think an exploration of post-Reagan greed, post-Reagan American wealth.
Hang on.
I think deserves deconstruction and exploration.
I don't disagree.
And I think it resonates with people to this day.
I think my problem with Wolf of Wall Street. Also, for the record, if you haven't seen Shutter Island, very good movie, very good piece of filmmaking there. My personal issue with Wolf of Wall Street, and it's similar to one of the issues I took with Baz Luhrmann's take on The Great Gatsby, also starring DiCaprio. There's some of the director's vision that I think winds up running contrary to what the material is trying to say. So with that telling of The Great Gatsby, the excess of the 1920s and those characters in particular winds up coming across more glamorous than gross. And
it's more of a celebration and sort of you're sad at the tragedy of this, not understanding that the tragedy is the natural consequences of their actions.
Yeah, and again, if the failure to connect those dots is the big failure of that version of The Great Gatsby, the biggest. Wolf of Wall Street, Scorsese just winds up leaning into a bit too much of his personal excesses. And unfortunately, when you're talking about a character whose entire life is excess in some respects, it just winds up creating this weird hybrid of... This relates to Killers in the following way. I saw somebody else say this, and I think there's a degree of truth to it. Part of the problem, other people have had this problem, not me, but part of the problem other people have had with correctly interpreting Scorsese's work over the years is they tend to idolize his flawed villains, or again, Travis Bickle is one of those, like, of the four guys that appear on the collage where you miss the point by idolizing them, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Main character from Wolf of Wall Street is in that same vein. Part of the problem that that this runs into is, again, that people have with properly interpreting what's going on here becomes it's almost too subtle for them. Like there's again, and I hate to say that about a movie as deliberately over the top as The Wolf of Wall Street, because boy is that movie excessive. But
do you think it's that people don't get it, or it's that they get it and they don't care? Again, I go to
I
sort
don't
of
know. It's
but I feel like there's
hang on. It's about 50-50, and
well, hang on. There's a reason why I brought that up is I feel like in at least modern society there's an amoralism that
you think
that lends itself to people being attracted to, you know, great wealth and, you know, fame and fortune.
Great wealth, no consequences, no
Right.
responsibilities, and when I'm dead, I'm dead. And it's a bad way to live. It's a bad way to structure society.
A lot of people thinking, I want, you know, it's that lizard brain that we talk about. Like, I want all the stuff now. I want everything now, and I don't really care who I hurt. And so they look at the character of the Wolf of Wall Street, and instead of going, this is a cautionary tale, they go, no, that's my hero. That's who I want to be.
Yeah, look, the number of people that do that for, like, Tyler Durden.
Yeah. Speaking of movies where people, I had to explain the point of Fight Club to my 9-year-old son.
Why is your 9-year-old son watching Fight Club?
He's not, because he's too young for movies. But I played.
Okay, so well, at least he's not watching Fight Club.
No, but I played the song from the soundtrack that has, like, Tyler Durden quotes in it. You know.
Okay.
From the Dust Brothers, and he was like, "What is this movie you're playing the song from?" Because he said something to me, and I went, "Yeah, Jonas, good to the last drop," and it boom, like Fight Club came into my head because that's a line from Fight Club, and I was like, you know what? Now I want to hear the song, so I put the Dust Brothers on, and he's hearing all of these Tyler Durden quotes. He was like, "What depressing movie is this?" And then I had to
one of the worst.
And then I had to explain Fight Club to him, and then I had to say, but please don't be one of these people who completely misunderstands Fight Club.
Yeah. And again, the lead character from Wolf of Wall Street is one of those, like, and part of that, again, I can't help but feel like part of what happened there was a misalignment. Like, Martin Scorsese shows him assaulting his wife, because he beats the crap out of Margot Robbie at one point, and then high out of his mind, speeding in his car with his daughter, his, like, infant daughter in the car, unsecured. Like, if at that point you decide that if you as a film goer can't see past the glossy veneer and go, no, this is not a good person, that's on you.
Yeah.
But it feels like that disconnect is part of what informed some of what he does here stylistically.
All right, and then finally we have Silence, we have The Irishman, and that brings us to Killers of the Flower Moon.
Silence is that's one of Scorsese's more slightly experimental ones recently.
I'll tell you what, I think
that's an interesting one.
I give Scorsese, as much as we made fun of The Irishman, I give it a pass, because if you're going to give anybody a blank check and an infinite reel of film to make their art piece, is there a better choice than Scorsese? Because at least he earns it.
A full-on blank check, yes, there's better choices. We already saw what Nolan did with a blank check.
That's fair.
One, he exercised restraint. Two, he generated almost $1 billion at the box office.
Yeah, Scorsese and Nolan might be your new celebrity death match. But all right, let's get into, speaking of celebrity death matches, let's get into Killers of the Flower Moon.
So, Killers of the Flower Moon.
As fast as you can. Please don't spend 3.5 hours.
This is not going to take long.
Okay.
The plot of this is not complicated. So we open with the Osage people of Oklahoma. This is where they've been moved after losing various battles with the United States government. They have been sent to Oklahoma, where drought walks by day and ravenous wolves stalk them by night. And that's the best description of Oklahoma I've ever heard.
Real quick, so people understand, one of the things that the United States, and I only bring this up, not that I want to do a whole tangent on this.
You know what? Go ahead. Let's get it out of the way because it has to be discussed.
The United States is in many ways not, has done a lot of immoral things and treated people poorly. We don't have the world's greatest history. However,
No one does.
I do get annoyed because the United States has done certain things to try to preserve its, moral dignity over the years. One of those things was, if we created an Indian reservation, it was basically a country within a country. Any Indian land that they were forced onto basically became an independent nation protected by the United States. Had its own laws. It was subjected to some degree of like federal oversight, but for the most part, they have their own laws, their own law enforcement, and we couldn't just keep moving them off of it once we gave it to them. So in the case of Killers of the Flower Moon,
in various points at various times, we have nibbled at the edges, though. There was a long period of time when that happened.
We can get into the minutia of it, but no one wants us to do that. My point is, you couldn't say, we have carved out this completely useless piece of rock for you to live on, and if you live there quietly, we won't bother you again. And then when the rock turns out to have oil on it, the United States goes, no! But there's not a whole lot they can do about it, which is kind of the point of this movie, at least in part. But I bring that up to say, like, at any given time, we could have just wiped the Indians off the face of the earth. No, instead, we just gave them shitty land that in some cases turned out to be not so shitty. There are so many other cases of worse treatment of indigenous populations, but it kind of tweaks my nipple when I hear people talk about like our treatment of the Indian. Yeah, ask other people living in, ask the people living in the Middle East about treatment of indigenous people. Ask people of Africa. Ask people of, China.
Mark, I beg of you, you can't do this. We can't talk about how terrible about the long history of violence between African tribes. Only they don't do that. They live in harmony with nature in an Edenic state, akin to the beginning of the Bible until the white man shows up, and then all hell breaks loose.
Yeah. I beg of you to watch Hotel Rwanda.
Hey, look, man. All I'm saying is people are stupid and ahistorical about this. They're historically illiterate, and it annoys me to. I'm with you. It annoys me to no end.
Yeah.
And this is not again. Neither Mark and I are claiming that all is hunky dory here. Bad behavior and in some cases borderline criminal behavior does deserve to be called out.
Sure.
Pretending that this is unique to one country in the history of the world,
or it's the worst. Again, I can't think of too many other situations where entire populations of people were wholesale given land to live on and said lots of luck and mostly left alone. Killers of the Flower Moon.
So again, we open with the Osage finding out they have oil on their land, and and since we are post World War II, we're a little bit post Spanish flu pandemic, so 1920s, and oil's worth a lot, and into this new boom in the West comes Robert De Niro, who is a small county 1920s crime lord, basically. And we follow Leonardo DiCaprio's character of Ernest Buckman as he arrives back. He's come back from the Great War. He served as both a cook and kind of a little bit on the front lines in World War I. He hooks up with his uncle and his brother who are here, and his uncle tells him, so here's how this works. I'm going to use loose mob talk because this is the language of Scorsese, and we're going to talk about what we're going to do, because the Osage, who I've been here pulling the long con on, they think I'm their friend, and what we do here is we try to marry, we try to get rights to the oil, And then, accidents. Who knows? And slowly we begin to accumulate wealth in this fashion. And Leonardo DiCaprio goes, well, I do love that money, sir. Further proof of... Dude, Scorsese can't get away from his biblical influences, and it shows. And I don't even mean that as a negative. So he starts off as a taxi driver around town, and he meets Molly, who is just, a full-blood Indian woman who is, entitled to part of a specific part of land that has oil on it, and he woos her. They get married. Indians start dying. The more legalese.
I cannot wait for people in the comments to say Native Americans, not Indians, you racist.
How about we just assume I'm acting in good faith and using the parlance of the film we're discussing and not get our panties in a bunch over this, everybody? Because, look, man, there's a line in this where De Niro asks DiCaprio, so how do you feel about the Reds? I'm not using on my language choice here is not out of bounds.
Keep going.
Anyway, they get married. They have a couple of kids. Other Indians start dying. Largely, this is orchestrated by Robert De Niro. Power and money begin to accumulate. And then there's a few deaths that are supposed to look different than how they do. There's a guy who they tell like he's an admitted melancholic, which in 1920s parlance means major depressive. And they say, okay, make it look like he killed himself. And the guy who they hire to kill him then shoots him in the back of the head. And you just have to wonder, what are we doing here? And all of this, it begins to wear on the Osage. It wears on the relationship between Ernest and Molly. A bunch of the Osage make the trip to Washington, D.C. to lobby Calvin Coolidge for help. And old Silent Cal is Silent Cal. But someone from the newly formed Federal Bureau of Investigation does show up, begins investigating, doesn't like what he sees, starts, finding a few people, turning them informant. He breaks down the whole thing, and there's a little bit of a bit at the end when Ernest decides he's going to confess everything. Then he changes his mind because Brendan Fraser looks at him and talks at him like he's out of a Coen Brothers movie. And I don't say that as an insult. To anyone dumping on Brendan Fraser's performance here, like, why is he talking like that? I mean, why is he talking like a 1920s lawyer? Because he's a 1920s lawyer, you idiots. And he changes his mind, and then their youngest daughter, Ernest and Molly's, dies of complications from whooping cough. Terrible tragedy. And with the death of his youngest child, he decides, you know what? This isn't worth it. He confesses. He testifies in open court. And one of the most interesting, and I've come to decide brilliant artistic choices is how they end this movie. Because as this movie is going on, like I know a little bit, I know enough to know that the trial and everything here is not actually going to end the way it's supposed, like the way you want it to be for a big happy ending, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also know that like we're not going to do like a montage over the next 20 years, right? Like that's not appropriate. It doesn't fit. So pulling back out of the last conversation basically between Ernest and Molly when he says, I've confessed to everything, and she goes, well, what were you injecting me with? Because she has diabetes, and insulin has become kind of a thing at this point. Part of the injections he
This is the best scene in the entire movie, by the way.
I don't disagree with you. And she just asks him, what were you injecting me with? Because...
And Leonardo DiCaprio proceeds to be every husband ever who's ever tried to lie to his wife.
Yes, indeed. Now... Again, he had been giving her insulin injections that at one point were insulin. And then the crooked doctors who were on the payroll of Robert De Niro gave him stuff to put in it to kill her, basically. And very nearly succeeded. And he says, I've confessed everything. And she goes, well, did you try to kill me? And he goes, oh, it was insulin, honey.
No. What he says is, I'm not.
Well, look, I did
I'm
not have sexual relations with that woman.
Yeah. I
He
look,
morphs
Hulk,
he
Hogan's
morphs it.
penis. Hogan's penis is 13 inches long. Terry Bollier's is not. Like all of it.
He carves a giant cave out of the middle of his chin and mumbles incoherently like our current president for a little bit there. It just,
Yeah, that's a rough scene.
he turns to Jesse Plemons, slaps him, and says, "Keep my wife's name out your mouth."
What were you injecting into me? That reefer, man. Like,
He wants to start doing the Charleston. Like, in all seriousness, again, he lies.
When I really laughed when he got up and said, everybody's heard about the bird. I said a bird. It's
He lies and says just insulin, and she just gets up and walks away from him. And very confused, he looks over at Jesse Plemons' character, who's standing off to the side, and like, wait a minute. He realizes very quickly, oh, I screwed that up, didn't I? And then we pull back to expose that.
You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the very end of what's the name of the Johnny Depp cocaine movie? Blow. Reminds me at the very end of Blow, where Johnny Depp is like, "My daughter's gonna visit me today," and everyone's like, "Sure they are." Sure she is. Okay.
Dude, speaking of the horrible wife characters, Penelope Cruz in that movie, good grief.
Yeah, oy vey. Moving on.
So we pull back to expose that what we've been watching to this point is basically a radio drama from the 1950s. So we go to the soundstage, we have the big cast, we have the studio audience, and we have the narrator who explains what happens next to everyone, basically. How Robert De Niro is convicted and then released on good behavior a handful of years later, told never to come back to Oklahoma, and he comes back to Oklahoma, and because, there is no justice for certain people. How Ernest was sentenced to life and then pardoned some years later, and he spent the rest of his days living in a trailer park with his brother, who was tried, but they couldn't get a conviction because, but in fairness to, this is presented very briefly as some giant miscarriage of justice. Let me express only the following. When the only evidence you have of an individual's wrongdoing is basically the word of the guy who admitted to shooting the victim in the head, that's not a strong case. I'm not surprised they had a hung jury. So those, and then the last bit of narration, the last bit of spoken dialogue in this movie is actually from Martin Scorsese himself. He steps up to read the last bit, which is essentially Molly's obituary after she passed away from complications with diabetes. And then, we get a overhead shot that kind of pulls back of a Osage tribal dance.
All right, I want to go back to this scene with Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone.
Not just this scene, but as a general rule, the chemistry between those two, it's exceptional.
I often make a joke about like sexual chemistry, and I mean, I don't know what other words to use. Sexual chemistry is what it is, but it's not like sexy like that. It's just, I always talk about with professional wrestling, the trick to professional wrestling is that it's fake when they get you to believe that even for a moment that it's real. I was like the Daniel Bryan WrestleMania win, where everyone was like, pants in the air because you bought into a story and the hero won, and it made you for a moment forget that it's all bullshit.
And then somehow, 9 years later,
let's not talk about that.
They managed to burn every bridge.
So one of the strengths of Killers of the Flower Moon is that it crosses. It's one of the rare cinematic gems that makes you forget you're watching a movie. That there is an energy, a dynamic between a lot of these characters that absolutely makes you feel like you are watching real people interact with each other. Not that there's a lack of drama. The drama is very much there, obviously. But just going back to that scene, because over the course of the 3 hours, Leonardo DiCaprio has love for Lily Gladstone. Lily Gladstone trusts and loves Leonardo DiCaprio. You feel it. It comes out of
for a big chunk of the movie, he is the only person she trusts in the world.
Sorry. And suddenly lobster in WWE. So 2 things about that. One, God bless you people for like I steal from Eddie Izzard and everyone adopts it as their own. I love the fact that everyone's now using lobster. And then yes, WWE couldn't land a plane if they tried. But anyway, you feel the love and the energy between those 2 characters. And so and you know he's killing her. And when she finally confronts him on it, when he's like, I'm doing the right thing, I'm trying to save my soul. With the death of my daughter, I cannot live in good conscience with what we have done. And she goes, what about me, boss? And
I'm an institution man now.
And
dude, he's so deep in his own lies at that point.
Well,
there's some things he can't even admit to himself.
Well, that's the thing. There's a lot going on in that little bit. I mean, we made a joke of it 2 minutes ago, but when you think about how that scene breaks down, like let's really talk about anatomy of a scene. I think at a very basic level, when you love someone, you don't want them to see you poorly. And he has nothing else left. He's lost everything. All he has left is the respect of this woman whom he loves. And he does not want the woman whom he loves to see him as a murdering scumbag and a betrayer and somebody who, quite literally tried to kill her. It's the last thing he has to hold on to.
And did facilitate the death of her sisters.
Yeah.
And which he's admitted to an open court, but like there's one last little bit there that he can't do it. He can't give it up.
And that's the thing is like he could have just as easily told the truth and he would have at least had the respect of having done the right thing. And he can't do it. And she knows he's lying. She knows he can't do it. And she does that walk away that a lot of women have to do with their men, where it's just like, I have given up so much. I have tried so hard. There is no helping you. All I can do is resignedly walk away. And that scene, I didn't necessarily cry. I was too tired, but it broke my heart. The look on her face, and then that realization that he had one last chance to save himself. He's going to hell no matter what, but he could have gone to hell at least with a good conscience. He could have, washed away his soul. And instead, he fucks up again, as we all tend to do. And you're right. Then he looks at Jesse Plemons, and Jesse Plemons is like, Spaghetti, I don't know what to tell you, pal. Like, you're a dumbass. It's a brilliant scene. Going back to Leonardo DiCaprio's performance in this, there's so much that he does, again, with his face and his body. I mean, everyone brings up like The Revenant, him and the stupid bear. And it's like, oh my God, Leonardo DiCaprio really goes for it.
He did
in that movie.
He does, but I think what annoys me about the discussion around that movie is, man, he really went for it with the bear. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a harrowing sequence. What he excels at so much in the acting in that movie is everything after the bear, and no one talks about it.
And so that's why I'm bringing it up now, What Kills with a Flower Moon.
Yeah.
Is that from the moment he shows up on screen to the very last scene that he's in the movie, he is bringing it in every scene. But he's not over the top. He's not bombastic. He's not overly dynamic. He's a guy in a situation giving you believable performance, and it is majestic to behold. Lily Gladstone, if she doesn't get a nomination for Best Actress, I'm not going to say, I don't know what her competition will be, so I'm not going to go as far as say if she doesn't win. But if she doesn't at least get nominated, that is a crime against the profession.
That is every Canelo scorecard distilled into acting awards format. And I am completely with you. Like, I'm of the opinion she should win, but I haven't seen everything. So I can't
say she's going to win when I don't know who the competitors are.
But right now, like, what is the best performance by an actress I've seen all relevant? Like,
what I'm going to say.
Hang on. Well, fine. Say it. Say it.
Margot Robbie is Barbie.
Yeah, of course you are.
But I'm not wrong either.
You're wrong.
You're wrong.
No. well, okay, one, I haven't seen that. Two, again, as it currently stands, from because the awards aren't June to December or January to December. It's a little bit before.
Yeah.
But
We're
what's
in
the,
Oscar season now.
yeah, but like, what's the best performance I've seen by an actress all year? It's Lily Gladstone in this, and it's not especially close.
To be clear, what I was saying was Margot Robbie will get nominated for Barbie. I don't think she'll win, and it's not better than Lily Gladstone. I'm just saying, like, what else is out there? Margot Robbie and Barbie, and that's about it. That being said, Lily Gladstone is phenomenal in this. There's so much weight to her performance and the subtlety, because again, she's not Sharon Stone in Casino. She's it's a very understated performance, but that's what it needs. That's what the character is. I'm gonna say something that to me is kind of funny. It'll sound funny when I say it, but I'm being very serious. I could listen to the Native American characters talk for hours. I could just listen to them. There's 2 or 3 different scenes of like this council of natives talking about like.
You can just call it the tribal council. That's fairly accurate.
Okay. This because there's a part of me that keeps wanting this council of Injuns.
They all break out into song. The one from Peter Pan, you know which one?
Yes. What makes the red man red? They have a sing-songy intonation of dialogue reading that is music to my ears. And I could have listened to I'm as bad as they get when it comes to certain scenes being overly long and me yelling, get to the point already. Not here. And again, I have criticized movie after movie. This show is just laden with me criticizing overly long scenes and then not getting to a point and me going, oh my God, end the scene already. Nope. Here, I was all about excess. I was like, please. And it only because
you wanted to be in that.
They sounded.
Yeah, you just wanted to be in that moment for longer.
Yeah. The way they talk, and again, like the content of what they're saying is whatever. It's like, yeah, every time we make a deal with the white man fucks us. Yeah, it's tales all the time. However,
every time you make a deal with something that exercises authority over you, it winds up screwing you over. I don't care what colors.
Them talking about it.
Oh yeah, in their case, yes.
If you ever, there's a scene in Barbie where the Kens are all playing Push by Matchbox 20, and and the girls are all supposed to look like they're being wooed. And
this sounds vomit-inducing.
Shut up. My point is, like, the funny thing about that scene, among other things, is the girl loving the sound of the guy singing that song and just not caring what he's singing, just being immersed in that sound and how wonderful it feels. That was me in those scenes. Like, them talking. I mean, it was something like Scorsese was here. Was like, yeah, I just had him read the dialogue. Like, there's nothing to it, really. I don't know what you're making such a big deal about. But
George Lucas could have directed this scene.
Yeah. Sand, it gets everywhere. I can't help it. I am a music person, and the sound of them talking was so musical, was so like pitch perfect in my ear. I could have listened to them for another hour talk about them being murdered, and I would have been like, tell me more. And it's such funny because it's such flat direction, but it's like fucking perfect. Like, it's weird. You don't have to always be all like Requiem for a Dream about stuff. You don't have to be wishing around the camera and shit. Sometimes, for what you need to get across, a flat angle, just direct shot at a guy's head like this, like what we're doing here, works just fine. And it weirdly worked in those scenes for me. I know it was a choice. It had to have been. These are not dumb people making this film. But the director of photography and Martin Scorsese really made, I think, an amazing choice in shooting it that way. Robert De Niro has made some truly awful movies the past decade.
I saw someone sum up the last 15 years of De Niro's career thusly, and I think it's very true.
Mm-hmm.
You have either one extreme or the other. He is either in a powerhouse performance and in one of the best movies of the year, or he's in the worst comedy you've ever heard of with the worst comedian leading that draws $150 at the box office, and there is no middle ground.
Yeah, this movie reminds you that De Niro is a powerhouse actor. He is phenomenal in this. And
He's so good.
I've talked about like Danny DeVito and some other older actors. Like, it might be time to give it up. Like, now you just sound like a dementia patient. And Robert De Niro was one of those people. I have seen him in a few things where I'm just like, please tell this man to go to bed. And then he comes out here and you're like, oh my God, it's like young De Niro. It's funny that like he gives a performance that makes me think they up-aged like a young actor. Like, he's so good in this. Like, I forgot he's 100.
There's, to your point about De Niro's acting, when he has to be younger, because this movie covers a pretty serious span of time.
Mm-hmm.
Something on the, what is it, like 8 years? Something like that. The big span of time. They don't change his face with makeup from younger to older, but physically, if you watch him act and move, he moves differently younger to older.
His like speech about when Leonardo DiCaprio says he's going to testify against him, and he's going into this whole thing about how I have friends in the Osage, it's going to be fine. This is going to come back to haunt you. Is so good.
It really is.
And I would just spend hours watching dailies of how many takes it took to get that before they were like, we got it. Like, how many times they had to perform it?
Oh, and that scene. If the best scene in this movie is not DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone at the very end, it's that one between those two in the jail.
Yeah,
like, there's such phenomenal camera work, and they had to have blocked this out so precisely, because if you look at where the shadow falls on De Niro's face, it never actually obstructs his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the shadow on his face, but it never gets in the way of what he's doing. It's brilliantly framed and blocked out. And so his face that whole time, like, now there might be a thing for a bit, but then people are going to forget, and I'll be back, and this is not going to go the way you think it is.
There's a couple of scenes in the movie that I kind of saw what Scorsese was going for. It's my only criticism of the movie, other than the length, but the length is the length. It is what it is. I mean, if any movie earned its length this year, it's this one. But still,
you and I mentioned this before we got started. 3.5 is a pretty big ask. For some of the other movies that have been around the 3-hour mark or north of it, we've talked a little bit about, okay, you can, in aggregate, we can cut this down, and we don't need to be quite this long. I said about Oppenheimer, like, we could have shaved it, but you have to go through with a real fine-tooth comb to do it. It's possible, but again, same kind of thing here. I don't know that I could cut 20 minutes out of this.
Yeah.
You could not appreciably edit this down much further without losing the artistic vision.
Endgame is over 3 hours long, and so this is the comparison. You and I were talking before the show, and I said this movie needed an intermission, but not for the reasons that you think. Yeah, 3.5 hours, sure, but that's not the reason. Like, Endgame is over 3.5 hours. You don't need an intermission for that. Once they invent time travel, it's go with that movie.
Again, speaking of movies that could have been shortened considerably, you could have cut. We talked about this when we reviewed Endgame. You could cut 15 minutes out of that without too much difficulty.
Yeah. That movie is pretty much outside of them mourning the loss of Black Widow. That movie is go until the Lord of the Rings ending, but which is fun. You don't need it. There's nothing to process in that movie. The time travel stuff is fun, and except for the bit with Black Widow and Hawkeye, which, I mean, it could have been more heart-wrenching, but Marvel doesn't really go for heart-wrenching. It goes for, we're making you a little sad, and then we're going to blow something up and make fun of it. Cool. That's the Marvel formula.
Oh, look, you had a brief moment of melancholy. Let's not dwell on actual emotion. Let's throw a pratfall in here.
Nobody wants the babies to be sad. Here's your cookie. But
Make
other than
them
that,
sad. Kill the children. It's one of the great. I think I've come to think more and more. It's one of the great missed opportunities that the MCU had to actually evoke genuine emotion. You had like 10 years to get people not only attached to these, like people were genuinely invested in what's going on.
Mhm.
And your big payoff for that is the one guy we all knew wasn't going to make it, not making it because we knew his contract, he didn't want to do this anymore. And that lack of like genuine catharsis and closure when it came to the lack of catharsis, not closure, the lack of catharsis from Endgame, I think is a big part of the reason the MCU lost so much momentum.
Well, I'm now comparing that to Killers of the Flower Moon. Boy, in the first hour and a half of this movie, is there a lot to think about.
Yeah.
This
There's
is not
a
slight
lot.
movie making here. Like, you know, Marvel had to kill half a universe full of people to get people to react emotionally. Like, oh, this is not good. I feel bad about this. This movie not quite so dramatic. But it's such a weighty movie with a lot going on, with so many good performances. You kind of need that 5 to 10 minutes to get up, stretch, piss, think about the world, think about what you just saw, and then get back into it again. This movie would have benefited from a process moment, an intermission for that. Whereas not every 3-hour movie does. The one thing I'm going to say is, and I used to make fun of this watching old TNA.
You know they're rebranding back to TNA, right?
I saw. I don't want to live on this planet anymore. So one of my criticisms last week, we had Dorian on for the Exorcist Believer, and I asked him to say, "Hey, can you your friends are watching? Can you please give me their feedback?" And he goes, "Yeah." One of them said, "Was the boss in a rush? Why was he like cutting you guys off, like trying to move things forward?" One, because we'll be here for the entire length of the fucking movie if I don't. Two, because I've listened back to our shows, and when we get too tangential, it gets meandering and unwieldy, and I think it affects the podcast overall. But the third thing, and part of the structure of how we've done these podcasts for the next 20-odd years has been, if you have two people talking over each other, you can't hear either one of them. I mean, Robert and I can get very excited, and we're all hanging on and shut up and, hey, I want to, there are times it can't be helped. In the excitement of what it is we're trying to have, in the excitement of the conversation that we're having, we talk over each other. It happens in other podcasts too, but sometimes it's more of like the signal to the other person, shut the fuck up, I have to get in here and say something. We don't have 12 hours. And sometimes you just think somebody's done. But Sean is the best about this. Sean takes a pregnant pause. You think he's done. And then you go to talk and he's still talking. You're like, hey, shit, please talk with rhythm. Not like William S. Burroughs. So my point being that sound is important, and you want to make sure that in a scene that as busy as some of them are in this movie. So for example, early on, there's a bit where the sister comes in and she's drunk and she's flirty and and she's making wisecracks to one of the men, and this ain't the time nor the place for the men to appreciate such nonsense from this tart, and in the middle of all of that, you have, I can't remember which characters they are. They might have been Leonardo DiCaprio's parents for all I knew, but like they're yelling like savages at the Indians and stuff, and it's a very busy scene, and there's a couple of points where everyone's kind of talking over each other, and it was very hard to make out what's being said. And that may have been the point. Scorsese and his director of sound might have looked at that and go, no, we want it to be busy and somewhat inaudible at times. That's real life. Sure. I didn't love it. And there's a lot about the scene I did like, and I kind of wish the sound had been clearer. And it happens a few times throughout the movie, throughout the 3 hours, where it gets a little too busy. There's too much going on in the scene, and I can't focus on any one thing.
Another example of that, the scene, I think it's where DiCaprio and Gladstone meet for the first time, when there's that like 1920s style pseudo drag race going on in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just this like high pitched engine whine that doesn't go away for a long period of time. In fact, you can see Lily Gladstone reacting to it and like putting her hands over her ears.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, it's not just an isolated incident. It does occur more than once.
Yeah, and it's one thing if if the point you're trying to make leads to is a part of some greater theme happening, or you're trying to create an aesthetic, it's a whole other thing when you're just kind of doing it, you're letting it be because, oh, well, the scene is busy. That's just how it is. And you're like, okay, but for an audience member, it was a little overwhelming. Boy, that is me reaching for something to criticize, by the way.
Yeah, there's not a lot to say negatively about this.
No, I mean, Jesse Plemons is Jesse Plemons.
That guy, man.
Plays the same character in every movie. I agree.
No. I don't think he does, but
he's close.
Eh,
He's definitely one of those guys now. It's like, hey, we need a Jesse Plemons. Well, why don't we just get Jesse Plemons then? Sure.
Okay, yes, there is definitely a type that he represents, but he's a better actor than that.
He is, but they're not giving him a lot to do.
My point about Jesse Plemons is apparently he turned. What was it he had to turn down to be in this? I think he turned. This was it. You've seen Nope, right?
Yes, Sean and I just reviewed it.
Yeah. He was originally supposed to be the character that Steve Yeun plays, the former childhood star.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And scheduling conflicts arose, so instead of that, he did this. But this is pretty much any time Jesse Plemons shows up, it's a pretty serious indicator of quality. There was that one movie he did that was on Netflix that you and I kind of did not care for. But
oh yeah, it's the one that we did opposite Deep Water.
Yeah, but I forget what it was, but it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah.
As a general rule, when he shows up, it's a pretty he makes good choices and he gets offered good roles.
Yeah. Look, I'm not taking away from his acting, but
the fact that he's like 15 years younger than DiCaprio and just calls him son the whole time is mildly amusing.
I said this of Jason Statham. Jason Statham is an excellent actor who's just not given a lot of opportunities to act because they would rather him just be tough guy kicking things. Jesse Plemons is an excellent actor. Instead, what they ask him to do is just read the lines with no intonation and be, serious government guy, because that's all he does now.
A little bit, yeah, and it's a little bit sad, but I tend to think he's gonna wind up doing something pretty good in the near future. I think if I have another criticism of this movie, it would be the following, and this is something that Martin Scorsese has talked about, and is part of. This is why I bring it up. Because when we get to the critical review, there are some people who struggle a little bit with. Look, there's a bunch of people for whom this was way too much movie. And then there's several people who are doing the grandstanding as a result of the subject material of this film.
Virtue signaling?
Yes. Armand White in particular rears his head.
Oh, Black You? Is he really?
Have you not seen the quote?
No, but I'll make sure I find it when we do that.
He claims this is Scorsese's first political movie.
Take the fuck out of here.
Yes. Yes. He elaborates from there. So again, we can find it later when we do that segment, but in the craft sense, I do have to bring this up.
One second. Before you do, I've only because I forgot to mention, I wanted to make sure I did it. We talk about gorgeous movies. We talk about like set designs, like really like fun set designs, like Barbie, once again, being a good example of this. But we also talk about like the creator, the color paletting and creator was pretty fantastic. This movie is 2 shades of color, like beige and black. And somehow
this is what happens when you actually film in Oklahoma.
Yes. The art of filmmaking is to take something with very little variation in color and still make it pretty. And this is a gorgeous looking movie. And if people are wondering, like, what do you mean? Like, it's I watched the same movie you did, and you're not wrong when you say it's 2 colors, beige and black. Okay, but talk to a visual artist, and there's things you can do to make things pop. There's things you can do to show contour, variations in color, even if it's just different shades. And this movie does that. I mean, if you don't have a fine eye for this sort of thing, you're not really studying it, one could call it drab. Okay? It's a little monochrome. But They still made it beautiful.
But those are not the same.
Right.
Those are not the same thing.
Right, and that's the thing is like it's like, wow, you're certainly giving this job a wonderful hand job. I'm like, I'm sorry, I watched this movie when I was awake. I watched this movie, and I looked for flaws. Like I was loaded for bear. I was like, okay, I'm on this with Robert. Let's let the hate fucking begin. And I tried. And when things are so good, I'm gonna say they're good. And I'm looking at this movie, and I'm like, this is really masterfully done. Like, everyone gives Martin Scorsese shit because it's like Marvel has ruined filmmaking, but it absolutely has. I'm sorry, read
Marvel,
a book, you Leptons. I mean, I'm sorry, like I get.
Hang on,
I get the appeal of like the Marvels and the Star Wars out there. Not everyone's looking for something like this, but if you would like to know how movies are made, if you'd like to know what a movie looks like, it looks like this.
A lot of people, like you mentioned, got really up in arms when he says, what's going on with the state of filmmaking is kind of killing the business. And it's easy to poke at the MCU because they are the biggest target. And I've been critical of that particular organization, and you've been critical of it, and we've given it praise when it's deserved it as well. But when he said this is not a healthy direction for the industry, he's not wrong. He's not wrong at all when he points that out. And we're starting to see that with, certain directors and even certain actors at this point going, oy vey. I mean, hang on, just to that point, you had Chloe Zhao, who was not complimentary of that process. Nia DaCosta, who directed, allegedly, the upcoming Marvels movie, has been distancing herself from that whole thing.
Nia DaCosta, who we praised. I mean, we criticized the ending of it, but we praised her for her Candyman movie.
Generally speaking, yeah. She's been out there going, well, it's more Kevin Feige's movie than mine.
It's not a good sign.
No, there's nothing about that movie that is looking good in the beginning.
I want to say even what's his nuts, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer guy, Josh Whedon. Even Josh Whedon, it was not exactly out there making fucking Killers of the Flower Moon. Walked away from Age of Ultron going. I don't know if anyone's seen the footage, but he ran off the set. He was wearing tattered clothing and chains, and he was going, "I was a man once," and then ran away.
Then he saw the camera, stopped, looked at it, and said, feminism. And then resumed running.
I kid, but even like Josh Whedon, who's not exactly a deep thinker when it comes to film, couldn't get through the Marvel process unchanged. Like, it was pretty phenomenal.
That's very true. So anyway, the last thing I wanted to say about this, and again, I have to bring this up because Scorsese's talked about it. Somewhat permeating this film is a very Catholic sense of guilt. I don't know that Scorsese's Catholic. I genuinely don't. But when I say there's a very Catholic sense of guilt here, it almost feels like there's an assumption that even the good white people are party to all the bad and therefore carry blame. And I'm sorry, here's my one curse word for the podcast: bullshit. Not how that works. Not how that works at all. And it's ahistorical, and frankly, it's illogical to try and pretend that. There are a lot of bad people in the world. Yeah, some of them are white, and this movie does a wonderful job of showing all the terrible evil that was done in this circumstance. Very true. Not disputing that. I reject the premise that because bad things were done to these people at some point, there's some kind of collective ongoing guilt that is somehow attached to me. Nuh-uh. Not you, not me, not anybody. I am not responsible for anything done by anyone other than myself, and neither are you. So again, I fundamentally reject the premise there of that. Is, again, it kind of permeates this film, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. Not because I'm not projecting this. He's talked about it. It's there. I reject the premise that he is operating under, and I find it profoundly flawed. And that's just kind of where that is. The more we try and look back, there's an amusing little comic that gets floated around on occasion, somewhat related to this. And it starts with, the redneck going to the illegal migrant. Yeah, so go back where you came from. Followed by an Indian going to the redneck. Yeah, go back where you came from. Followed by a dead Indian going to that Indian. Yeah, go back where you came from. Followed by another dead Indian. Like, the notion, I'll say it again because we talked very briefly about it before. The notion that humanity has not been terrible to itself throughout the long, tragic history of our existence on this planet until one group of people showed up and brought forth evil, it's utter ahistorical, amoral nonsense. Do not buy into that. And that's kind of my closing sentiment there, and Mark has signed off, so...
No, I'm here. I thought you were going to go... Do you have anything left for the craft review, or are you good?
No, again, our complaints are very, very minor. I fully expect this to get nominated for Best Picture. At this point, it might win. It's an exceptional piece of filmmaking.
I'm going to say this. I'm going to need you to get a hold of your fucking self, okay?
I promise not to react at all.
It's between this and Barbie. And this is not me fanboying. This is me taking a sober look at the slate of films this year. There are 3 Best Picture contenders right now: Barbenheimer and Killers of the Flower Moon.
I do not disagree with you.
On my life, I couldn't tell you which one's going to end up winning Best Picture.
Come on,
I mean,
like the Academy could pass up the opportunity for some good press.
Certainly needs it, and I wouldn't. You didn't see it, and I don't want to do too long on this, but leaving aside your prejudices and not taking a moment to consider the thematic content of Barbie, it's a well-made movie. It looks good. There were great performances.
Great's a bit of a stretch, but
your brother. If Barbie wins Best Picture, we are launching a full-scale toy multiverse. Go fuck yourself. I don't want to live here if that happens.
Hold on.
I'm moving. I'm moving to Uranus.
Okay. 1, again, obviously my brother. 2, he's not wrong. The sequel will be pushed through production so fast
and bombed so hard.
No one will care because there'll be 2 others coming, and the Uno game, and the Monopoly game, and Polly Pocket.
Look, I'm not a fan of any of this, and I don't know why my celebrating the success of Barbie means I also appreciate the stupidity of Lizard Brain.
Because I tend to be of the opinion that if you are aware of what the consequences of some action will be, and you celebrate said action anyway, you're at least partially responsible.
I can appreciate a pretty picture. I'm allowed.
I didn't say you weren't. Okay, stance. Hang on. No, let me make my stance very clear on this. If you look at the scape, if you look at anything, well, for the sake of film, they say we're making a Barbie movie, and you and I get together, and I say this is not going to lead to anything good because because one, when we first talked about it, they were like going to get Amy Schumer to play Barbie.
Yeah, and Barbie was going to be fat. There was the whole thing. I remember.
And that would have bombed horribly.
Just sure it was. That's why I got scrapped. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it did. That's why they went back into. Yeah, I get it. But it's either going to bomb horribly or it's going to succeed, and all we get is toy movies. That'll be the new thing. And my stance.
Hang on. Can we stop saying that this is all Barbie's fault? We didn't get all the wrong lessons from the Lord of the Rings success either.
I'm not pretending that we didn't.
Fucking 3 Hobbit movies, and now we're getting a cartoon and the stupid series on Amazon Prime. We took all the wrong lessons from that as well.
We did no. Okay, hang on. That's a very different point. Let me explain what happened with Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit was not taking the wrong lesson from those movies.
Well, it kind of was. It was like, holy shit,
No.
you know, these things made $1 billion in a Best Picture. We have to keep doing Tolkien shit. I'm like, no, but you really didn't.
That's not about. If you look at how long there was between Return of the King and The Hobbit, what happened was not boy, we need to do more stuff in the style of Lord of the Rings. What happened was the consolidation of the film industry around recognizable IP that accelerated very quickly. It had been happening.
Okay. But that's also what's happening with Barbie. It was the toy movie made a lot of money, and so we have to keep making the toy movies because that's all we're thinking about here.
Consequently, I root for the toy movies to fail.
Okay. Again.
Not because I think they're bad, but because I don't like what will happen if they succeed.
Okay, I don't care at this point. I have to put that argument aside because to me, what matters is, was a good film made, and then will it be celebrated? And so I'm right. Like I said, this whole conversation got started because like Killers of the Flower Moon is a Best Picture nominee, Oppenheimer's a Best Picture nominee, Barbie's a Best Picture nominee. Which one of those three? And then there'll be three more. And like, because I think what was it, 6 or 8 last year?
I think they do 10.
10, even better. So we'll see what else. I mean, maybe Napoleon when that goes. Napoleon's Ridley Scott, right?
Yeah. And Ridley Scott's due for a good one.
I think Napoleon's probably going to end up being.
It'll probably be up there. They'll throw a bone to something other than Barbie and Oppenheimer that was decently popular that doesn't deserve it, but will gather some attention.
It's fucking nothing we reviewed this year. I'll tell you that much.
We're pretending these people have integrity. They'll throw one at Black Panther 2 because we're sad that Chadwick Boseman died.
That's way out of the time frame.
Wouldn't that still be viable for this year? For this set of Oscars?
It was last November, and that was nominated for
right. Oscars. And it was right because they nominated Angela Bassett for no good reason.
Okay, I've had enough of you. I'm moving on.
I'm not wrong.
Ladies and gentlemen, the money.
We're in the money. We're in the money.
Alrighty. Yes.
One thing about the demographics of this movie before you get into the specific numbers. Something like 80%, 60 to 80% of the audience for Killers of the Flower Moon was 35 and under. All you smooth brain jackasses out there in your C-suites pretending that the only thing the young people care about is the MCU, you are catastrophically mistaken.
Film bros are a thing. On a Marvel budget of $200 million.
And they then get on their podcast and whine that watching a Martin Scorsese movie is like going to the DMV, and I wish to smash their faces together.
It earned $44.3 million at the time of this recording. As of October 22nd, the year of our Lord 2023, Killers of the Flower Moon has grossed $23.3 million in the US and Canada and $21 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $44.3 million. In the United States and Canada, the film was projected to gross $20 to $25 million from over 3,000 theaters in its opening weekend. The film made $9.4 million on its first day, including $2.6 from Thursday night previews. It went on to debut $23 million, finishing second behind holdover Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour. I love my girlfriend. She's very funny. She's insightful. She's a huge fan of what we do here. If she tells me one more time, even in jest, that you and I should review a concert movie, I may have to break up with her. I like, she has now 2 and 3 times said, "Oh my God, the Taylor Swift movie is making so much money. You guys review stuff that makes money." She's not wrong.
We review movies.
I keep telling her, like, it's a concert movie. They pointed a fucking camera at a concert performance. There's nothing to review here.
What exactly would there be for us to talk about?
Look, not for nothing, but years ago, I also saw the Big Four concert in the theater. It was Metallica, Anthrax, Slayer, and Megadeth. I wouldn't have made you review that either. Like, as much as I love those bands and I love that movie. This past year, this past April, I think it was, there was a listening party a film listening party for the new Metallica album. They literally would just like play music videos or what appeared to be a screensaver during each one of the new Metallica songs. I wasn't going to review that. Like, there's nothing to. Like, I hate to tell you, just because it's in the movies doesn't mean like it's a movie to review. And I don't know why I have to make that distinction, but apparently I do.
Look, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm.
Just one other thing I do want to say about this, because Christopher Nolan came out and kind of supported this. And he basically said, yeah, theaters have to make money. We like theater. We like movie chains. If big studios aren't going to give them material and are going to try and send it straight to streaming, they will find something to fill those screens with.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it's a video of a concert. And people are enjoying it. So you know what? Godspeed,
but this is
man.
not new. Like I said,
No, it's not.
That Big Four concert was years ago. I saw Canelo's first fight on pay-per-view at a movie theater. I've seen a bunch of UFC of it. They're still doing those. You know what's also at movie theaters? Operas. You ever go to an independent film at a big time movie theater? One of the trailers they'll show you is usually for a Fathom event for some sort of opera.
Yeah, there's definitely a season that exists for those, and they're not bad.
Yeah. I just like, I understand she's having fun with us. I understand she's just like, oh, like, look, it's the number one movie. You have to talk about it. No. It's the number one movie. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Taylor Swift apparently is the Madonna of our age.
And consider how badly that's going for Madonna right now.
Ugh, Madonna, whose face looks like fucking
dude, she looks like Roger the Alien.
I was gonna say, who is it that's in Jesus Christ? Goodfellas, I think. Ray Liotta. Yeah, Madonna's face is now starting to look like Ray Liotta. Yay.
What? Current Ray Liotta, who's been dead for a couple of years.
Yes. All right. Now I've gotten myself in enough trouble. Sorry, everyone. I'm sick. Yes, Taylor Swift retained its spot for 2 weeks running as the number one movie in the world. I'm fine with this. Look, if I had to bet, who'd win the weekend, Taylor Swift or Killers of the fucking Flower Moon. I mean, here, your brother put this up. He's like rapid firing comments, and I'm like, some of these are okay. This one I'll put in there.
He's not wrong.
Critical Role is now a Cinemark thing at least once a year.
That's true. They will usually, again, he's right, once a calendar year, once every 12 months, they will usually have one of their game sessions that is in theaters.
So if I took 100 people right now and be like, which would you rather watch, a Taylor Swift concert or the new Martin Scorsese movie? 99 out of 100 go, who's Martin Scorsese? Yeah, so I'm not fucking surprised by this. Like this, nor am I bothered by it. Like I'm glad it made money. I'm glad it brought people to the theater. I don't begrudge. Like I'm not. I was telling Sean this because Sean sent me something about The Cure, and I was like, yeah, I was a huge fan of The Cure when I was a kid, and he was like, yeah, it was one of those things that I never really paid any attention to. And I said, as Patton Oswalt did a bit, it was a setup to talk about selling out and the story that he tells about him selling out. But the precursor
him trying to sell out and no one buying.
No, he apparently got quite the gig. You should listen to his stand-up where he talks about it.
I will not.
Anyway, he was like, when you're in your 40s, you just the stuff that was important to you in your teenage, when you were a teen or in your 20s, not nearly as important anymore. And the example that he gave is he's not the music snob that he once was. He's like, I don't hate any music anymore. There's stuff I don't like, but I'm not screaming that people shouldn't listen to certain things. Taylor Swift is not something that I listen to. I mean, who hasn't done, use the sound of "It's me, I'm the problem, it's me"? I did one of my ex-wife for that reason. It's a funny song. But Taylor Swift is not really my thing, but I don't begrudge the zillions of people who listen to her and and she brings joy to their life. And so again, I'm not surprised her movie was the number one movie of the weekend. If they remake Yentl with fucking Taylor Swift, that I'm gonna have a problem with. But her doing what she does,
half the budget would just be the prosthetic to make her nose bigger.
You know, if they Moonstruck starring Taylor Swift. If
they could totally get Nicolas Cage to reprise that role though.
My point is, like, I don't begrudge people who listen to it, and I don't begrudge the fact that her movie was #1 in the theaters. She brings a lot of joy to people's lives, and look, I get it. Not everyone's going to listen to, you know, cattle decapitation or goat whore, but a lot of people will listen to Taylor Swift, and God bless you for it. That being said, Killers of the Flower Moon did debut at #2 for the weekend. The Exorcist Believer dropped 2 to 3. Saw Patrol dropped from 3 to 5 rather. Jesus Christ, 3 to 4. The Nightmare Before Christmas, firmly cementing itself as a Halloween movie, in case that debate's still raging.
30th anniversary re-release.
Debuted at #5. Let me fucking tell you how many broken women I know love The Nightmare Before Christmas. I don't know if there's a correlation.
Hang on.
Mm-hmm.
You want one of the ultimate red flags in dating, everybody?
That?
No. It's not just that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, I will say that because that's not a Tim Burton movie, but a woman who has a bizarre love affair with, especially the earlier works of Tim Burton, you don't want that. You do not. Nothing good lies down that path.
Facts can confirm. So yeah, that debuted at #5. Saw dropped from 4 to 6. The Creator 5 to 7. A Haunting in Venice 7 to 8. The Blind 6 to 9. And The Nun. The Nun getting all kinds of, like, I've had 2 or 3 different people now tell me they just watched The Nun and thought it was great. Which, speaking of which, I got a request from a woman I'm dating that we review all the movies in the Conjuring universe. Apparently, that's like the shit when it comes to horror right now.
Okay. Hang on. No, I'm not trying to be dismissive here. Let's do a couple of things here about this. That whole thing spun kind of out of control. You've got The Conjuring, so you got those 2 movies. You've got the Annabelle trilogy, which is wildly inconsistent. You have the 2 Nun movies. There's another one. I think The Curse of La Llorona is from that same.
I believe so.
It's part of the Conjuring universe. I'm not saying I don't want to go through each of those individually at the moment for the sake of arguing which ones are good and bad. Let me just say the following about the Conjuring universe films. If you watch more than 2 of those in rapid succession, you understand all of them stylistically and structurally, and there is no more fun to be had. You need time between those for things to reset so you can enjoy them again. You can't go through them rapid fire. It all blends together very, very quickly.
Well, while nobody may have seen The Nun in theaters, everyone's watching it on PVOD right now. It's been brought to my attention a number of times. Speaking of 30th anniversaries, Hocus Pocus maintained its spot at #11. All right, and then debuting this week were The Canterville Ghost at 19, Soulmates at 23, and the Persian version at 26. The Delinquents at 37, Another Body Murdered, or just Another Body, at 38, and Full Circle at 52. All right, that's that. Worldwide, excuse me. Not a lot of movement.
Not really.
None, as a matter of fact. So just for the sake of doing it, Barbie, Super Mario, Oppenheimer, Guardians, Fast X, Spider-Man, The Little Mermaid, Mission Impossible, Elemental, and Ant-Man and the Fentanyl Corpse. Hey, there are currently 3 other movies not in the top 10 that did better than Indiana Jones. John Wick, Transformers, and The Meg.
The Meg. Oh, bless you wherever we made that happen. The Meg 2 being grossing more money than the nearly $300 million budget attached to Indiana Jones, and nobody wants any of this, makes me happier than you could imagine. Thank you.
Taylor Swift is currently the number 23 movie in the world at 178 million.
She's gonna overtake the next 2 in the next week or so.
I'm kind of hoping Taylor Swift makes at least $400 million and does better than Indiana Jones at this point. I'm rooting for it.
I'm half rooting for it to knock out Ant-Man and the Wasp because that'll just make me laugh all the harder.
All right. So here's the deal. It has to make more than $476 million to knock Ant-Man and the Wasp out of the top 10.
I mean, it's not going to, but I can dream.
I don't know. I mean, this week. So I think I mentioned.
Hang on. We did this before, but for the sake of saying it again, that top 10 right now is basically the top 10 for the end of the year.
Yeah, I made an argument the last time we talked about this that I think the Hunger Games will crack the top 10 just because I can't believe how popular it is. But I'm starting to wonder about that now because apparently it's not tracking well.
Dude, nothing at the end of this year is tracking well. It's so weird.
Yeah, I saw something on Twitter. Someone that follows the tracking numbers that it's tracking as the lowest opening movie of the Hunger Games movies yet. That being said, it may just be it was a different time when those movies came out, so the whole movie industry has changed since then. I don't know if it's a fair scale. So I'm not willing to just necessarily pronounce the death of the new Hunger Games movie yet.
Well, for the record, I'll say that one as an outside shot. That one might. But
the Marvels is going to bomb hilariously.
Dude, they've released the tracking, like again, some of the early projections and whatnot for this. It's projecting like 20 million opening weekend.
Oof.
Its advanced ticket sales are 60 some odd % behind like the Eternals.
Conspiracy theorists, and some of them are our friends.
I don't mind a good conspiracy theory every now and then.
Said of Captain Marvel at the time that even though the movie made over $1 billion, and everything at that point was making over $1 billion for Marvel, Marvel couldn't miss. It was printing money. But Captain Marvel made over $1 billion despite the fact that anytime anyone shared their experience at the theater was empty. And that they're saying that the Walt Disney Company just would buy blocks of tickets to inflate the numbers. This apparently was a very famous conspiracy theory that was touted on Reddit. I'm not saying I believe that. I think that's hooey, but I'm throwing it out there as a discussion point.
Allow me to say the following about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Reddit conspiracy theory around it is significantly overblown. I think releasing that movie at that time was, for a variety of reasons, a mistake. If we look at the long-term trajectory of the MCU, I just think it was a mistake. But anything released at that moment would have done good numbers. And while I think that conspiracy is, again, it draws from incremental points of data and it's largely anecdotal, there's enough anecdotes to make me question. And not enough. Again, I am not saying that Disney fabricated the whole thing. That's a load of crap. They didn't. That would actually be there would have been a very serious problem for them for a variety of reasons. But I am not going to sit here and pretend that some people at Disney would not have maybe taken steps to ensure that a movie released between Infinity War and Endgame, also featuring their first female lead, they might have taken steps to make sure it got to the $1 billion mark. That's not, to my way of thinking, that's not outside the realm of possibility. Buying it up there the whole way, no. Putting your thumb on the scale, I don't think that's out. Again, that would not surprise me one bit.
How many times was the Marvels reshot, recut? How many times did they have to go back and do reshoots? How many different ways did they arrange this movie so that it was palatable for a general audience? Because I'm hearing a lot.
So hang on. It's been reshot several times. There's been a lot of work done on that front. Industry insiders stories have started coming out. The first test screening of this was only 88 minutes. And it scored like a 30-something with the audience, which is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
So they added some time to get it to around the 90-minute mark, and it actually scored worse. There's no... Dude.
Look, I watched Ms. Marvel.
There's no saving this. Here's the bad news for Marvel. I'll be quick, and then I'll let you get to your point, I promise.
Mm-hmm.
they know the Marvels sucks, and they know it's gonna bomb, and they've tried everything short of actually scrapping the project. They're just gonna throw it out there and come what may. They know they're in trouble. They're dumping Echo in one batch. They're not doing the weekly release, which is normally what Disney Plus does. They're gonna let you binge Echo because they know it sucks, and one week of bad headlines is all they can stomach out of it. So throw it out there, give it a bad week, and then no one will care anymore. They fired
Yeah, I was
the
gonna mention this.
director and writers of the Daredevil reboot they're trying. And some of the stories that came out about what they were doing there involved Daredevil not actually getting into the costume and doing any crime fighting until the 4th episode, potentially killing off Matt Murdock and replacing him with his female person of color lawyer friend. So there have been some pretty serious horror stories that have come out of that. And for whatever this is worth, some of those people that they fired, not only fired, no longer ever allowed on Disney property or working on Disney projects. So something happened there. But they shot I think 9 of 18 potential episodes for that first season. Have to scrap all of it, starting over from square one. They know they're in trouble.
Yeah. So the Marvels is. I watched Ms. Marvel with my kid, my feminist kid, and I watched it with my now ex, who's not a huge fan of these things, but she doesn't know art, but she knows what she likes. Independent of being a comic book fan, independent of being an MCU fan, and I know Andrew Graham, friend of the show, his wife watched it, his kid watched it. It was an appealing show. I think when you take away the prejudices of comic book fans and you just go girl stuff doing action stuff, it was an enjoyable look. I have watched a lot of shit with my kids that they, from like the Disney Channel. I've watched those zombie movies. I've watched The Descendants. I've watched a lot of that stuff that's geared towards, preteen, tween age groups, maybe even younger, depending on what you let your kids watch. And Ms. Marvel was about there. It absolutely felt like a tween Disney.
Hang on. The word you're
Disney
looking
show.
The word you're looking for is teeny bopper. It's
Sure.
It's a teeny bopper CW show.
Yeah. It was.
Hang on. Here's the big problem that I personally think they ran into with Ms. Marvel. If you want to know how not popular the character of Kamala Khan is, Miles Morales was orders of magnitude more popular before the Spider-Verse movies.
Mm-hmm.
That's how dead in the water the character of Kamala Khan has been for a long time. That was a poor decision. They appealed to a niche audience with it. And let me be clear, I don't necessarily object to that, but understand that's what you're doing. Niche audience who is not engaged with the rest of your product.
Right.
And
That's
then
the thing.
expecting to convert them, horrible mistake.
Right. That's the thing is that was the point that I was trying to get to. Ms. Marvel is a perfectly nice show to watch with your daughters and your wives who
I'll
aren't
take
coming.
I'll take your word for it, but nobody else saw it.
But
the watch numbers on that.
But they're not. But one, they're not on board then for the next 97 different Marvel things that come out. Number one. Number two, they're probably not on board to see the Marvel. Like my kid will go because I'm going to take her because we're going to talk about it. But I'll tell you, if we didn't do this show, I don't think I'd even go bother to go see it. And my kid's not going to ask me to take her. Nobody cares. And then you have the other character in this. This was a minimal character in the show WandaVision that nobody cared about, who had the dumbest line of dialogue in that entire show.
You are not wrong.
I still fight with people about this because like WandaVision was badass. I can't get past that fucking line after she's tortured this town. And the woman goes, they'll never know what you gave up for them. That's that character.
Yes, we've mentioned this before, but here's the other uphill problem the Marvels has. The homework you have to have done.
Mm-hmm.
It goes as follows. Okay, you have to have seen Captain Marvel. You know what? To watch a direct sequel, I'll give you that one, but you still have to have done it. You have to have watched WandaVision to know what's up with Photon. You have to have watched Ms. Marvel, and WandaVision, decently watched. Ms. Marvel, catastrophic failure. You have to have watched Secret Invasion to know what's up with Nick Fury, and that was less watched than Ms. Marvel.
Yeah. I was getting to that. That like Secret Invasion bombed hard. Nobody watched it and it sucked.
And
so like
on the back, when everything necessary to watch your crappy movie is itself very crappy, you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. All right. So that's the news and the money for right now. We'll see what as far as projections go. Five Nights at Freddy's going to win this weekend. I was starting to say that before.
You know what? At this point, however, I'm going to root for Taylor Swift. I think you're right, but I'm going to root for Taylor Swift just for the meme.
Sure. Like I said, I bought Thursday night preview tickets because Friday night I'm busy, and then Saturday is the Tyson Fury fight, and then I'm busy, and then Sunday I've got stuff going on all day. So like Thursday was literally the only day I could take my kids to go see Five Nights at Freddy. Which, by the way, for those we are reviewing it, but it's a big panel. It's Robert, Dorian, Jason, and Alexis, and I bowed out. Which also meant it got moved to Wednesday because Dorian had a scheduling conflict. So damn you, Hollywood, Wednesday next week. Five Nights at Freddy, hosted by Alexis. Have fun with that.
We'll have something.
I bowed out because I don't want 5 people on a show. That's a lot of people not talking for many minutes at a time. Anyway, my point being that when I went to go buy Thursday tickets, a lot of the Thursday previews for the theaters around me, and there's quite a few, were close to selling out or sold out. Like this movie, I don't think it's going to do like gangbusters or anything. Maybe it'll be the one that knocks out Ant-Man. Who knows? At this point, something needs to knock it out of the top 10.
It's an embarrassment that at $475 million is still the 10th best movie all year in that respect.
We are almost into November.
I beg of somebody in the movie-going public, we must elect some movie that will deal with that fentanyl corpse hanging out in the corner of 4th and Vine. That is Ant-Man and the Wasp, still taking up space.
Yeah.
This is a failure of policy, people. We have to address it.
All right. And then with that said, here is the critical review.
Are you ready? No! I said, are you ready?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
All right.
And that tracks.
Yep. 92% tomato meter, 85% audience score. We go to
we do on verified on top critics. Yeah, that tracks. Goes up to 95.
That actually went up. And then all audience, watch this drop to rotten. Close. 78.
Yeah, that's a pretty. Again, this is too much movie for a lot of people, and well, fair enough, but that's what it is.
All right. So the ChatGPT says, enormous in runtime, theme, and achievement. Killers of the Flower Moon is a sobering appraisal of America's relationship with indigenous peoples.
Okay.
And yet another artistic zenith from Martin Scorsese and his collaborators.
I have to briefly mention the following. We talked a little bit about this, so let me elaborate. Not Robert De Niro, nor Leonardo DiCaprio, nor anyone involved in this is actually a representative of the United States government. I'm not saying the U.S. government and its history of relationship with the Native Americans is good. It's pretty piss poor as a general rule. Pretending that this is about the institutional attack on them is a bridge too far. It's about profound evil that was done to them. But corruption on the scale that we're talking about here, it's actually quite small. Once the larger wheels of justice come to bear, everything falls apart for them in some very real ways. So it feels like everyone wants to talk about how badly the Native Americans have been treated by the government, and I'm not fine. It's true. If Martin Scorsese wanted to make a movie about how the government treated the Native Americans, he failed. This has nothing to do with the government.
Bob Grimm of Reno News and Review. Leonardo DiCaprio has never allowed himself to be this miserable on screen before, and this guy was in The Revenant.
He might have been more miserable in The Revenant than this, but Interesting that he draws an unfavorable comparison between marriage and children and falling off a cliff and hiding yourself in the body cavity of a recently dead horse to stave off the cold.
Rex Reed, Observer, top critic. In the end, I recommend seeing it, but I think Killers of the Flower Moon is the kind of movie you respect and admire without much actual enjoyment. I don't know.
You know what? Hang on. I can appreciate that sentiment, and that's actually, look, that's a fine sentiment. There are movies that is true of. This might be one of them. Even if you don't, again, if you don't feel there's a lot of people doing I've complained about, I've seen them complain about this. There's a lot of people doing I didn't laugh, I didn't have a good time, therefore I didn't enjoy it, therefore it's bad. Like, go back to TikTok, you infant.
Here, my only comment about that is I enjoy good film. Not every film needs to evoke joy. Sometimes I can just, you ever go to a museum, an art museum, and you see a painting, and the painting is gorgeous, it's haunting, it's beautiful. It didn't make me feel good, but it's a good piece of art, and I felt the joy of experiencing good art. As whitey as that might make me sound, but I think
it's the best way to phrase that in a general sense.
David Nussera of Real Film reviews that this movie was way too much film, a palpable misfire that could and almost certainly should have topped out at around 2 hours.
You're missing it out there, buddy. I don't mind talking about how I think certain films should be edited down. I don't know where you'd cut this one without losing way too much of it.
Richard Probst of the independentcritic.com. The technical craft is alive and well here, and watching this ensemble come to life is a joy. But Killers of the Flower Moon never really does its story justice. The final result is one of Scorsese's most underwhelming and frustrating cinematic efforts.
My friend, you need to watch more Scorsese. There's much more underwhelming than this.
Carson Tamar of Butted Popcorn. When one takes into account everything about Killers of the Flower Moon, it is clear the film is an underwhelming disappointment. Okay, I need to find out what she thinks was a roaring success then. Let's see.
Oh boy.
Oh, well, here we go. She says the Taylor movie. For anyone with an interest or warm memories towards Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour is a must-see cinematic experience.
Gave a negative review to the original Dumbo.
Okay, well, she didn't love The Exorcist Believer. Gave a good review of Saw X, Paw Patrol, The Creator. All right. I mean, they can't beat her up too much.
No, you gave a positive review to My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. Was half of your shtick just going back and rewatching old Disney movies and giving them bad reviews?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of here I can really beat her up with. All right, moving on. You got away with it this time, Butted Popcorn, whatever the fuck your name is. Let's see here.
Likely you to recommend Rotten Tomatoes to someone you know. I don't know how to tell you this, but most people don't recommend aggregate websites to other human beings in the course of natural conversation.
Oh, here's our friend. Oh, we have two back to back here. Kevin Carr, Fat Guy at the Movies. Classic Martin Scorsese slow burn with complex, understated relationships that make for a gripping film.
He looked up buzzwords because he knew he liked it but didn't know why and just threw them onto screen.
The future ex-Mrs. Robert Winfree, Carla Renata of the Curvy Film Critic. Clocking in at over 3 hours, Scorsese masterfully accomplishes sharing history and atrocities of the Osage Native Americans with needlepoint precision. Lily Gladstone is quiet, fire, and powerful as Molly Burkhart. Okay.
Needlepoint precision, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Needlepoint.
Black Robert Winfree, Armand White of the National Review. The transgressions of Killers of the Flower Moon cannot do justice to this awful history because Scorsese's regular gangster template is hackneyed.
You know, I don't agree with that. I will say, though, he's not wholly wrong when he mentions that there's elements of the traditional Scorsese template that are ported here because that's the language in which he communicates, more so than because it was accurate. And again, your mileage will vary on that.
Uncle Malty, Leonard Maltin of LeonardMaltin.com, top critic. Killers of the Flower Moon is magnificent, a work of beauty, even though the world it portrays is squalid. I admire and respect it, but I would like it better if it weren't so difficult to sit through. God, like, fucking pansies, man.
There's a lot of, if I may steal from the world of professional wrestling, much as I loathe it most times, Big Cass had the appropriate way to deal with some of these critics. There's only one word to describe them. And if you need it spelled out for you, it's SAWFT.
Alachia Queen of Alachia Queen.
Okay.
Scorsese did the Osage dirty by painting them as ignorant victims. The movie plays out like a true crime docuseries, but with only the live reenactments. It lacked personal insight of the Osage and those trying to seek justice. Oh, for fuck's sake, lady. Like, I know I slept through a good portion of this movie, but, you know, did you sleep through the whole thing?
She's really sad. There's not one of those, like, cold case true crime podcast series on this yet that she can binge and review instead.
Christopher Lloyd of The Film Yap. This will be our last one. A ponderous, turgid low for Scorsese and Company. People will focus on being too long, but the ideal runtime would be 0 minutes. Ha! Flawed at the conceptual level, a story about the victimizing of Native peoples that banishes those people to the background. Are you kidding me?
Oh, oh, for the love of... Okay, hang on, buddy. Scorsese very deliberately chooses to focus the narrative predominantly on the people perpetrating the crime rather than the victims. That's not banishing them to the background at all.
Yeah, they are very present in this movie.
For
did he not miss the whole fucking drum thing at the end?
He's, again, this is a guy who read the premise and decided that he knew how he would have handled it, and because it wasn't handled that way, boo earns.
All right, tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, and I need to load up my calendar, and tomorrow, and tomorrow. Tomorrow, myself and David Wright will be reviewing season 2 of Strange New Worlds. I just got the episode where they crossed over with Lower Decks today. That was fun.
Do they all turn animated or something?
No, the other way around.
That tracks.
And then Thursday, Robert, Alexis, and I think Jason, what do you guys call yourselves? The Unholy Dirtbags or something like that?
Alexis, I believe, messaged you about that date having to shift. Did
it's Thursday now.
I thought it was different than that.
Last I heard, it was Thursday. Doesn't matter. Allegedly.
Let me bring up my calendar and then let me double check what she mentioned. Okay, no, that was for that might have been for something else. Okay, never mind.
Yeah. Anyway, Thursday, the Unholy Nerds will review
to finish watching that before then. But
we'll review Fall of the House of Usher.
Pretty good so far. I'm about halfway through.
Friday, I'm sure there'll be a new episode of Movies that Guys for Movies Don't Suck and Some That Do. Saturday, the band is getting back together yet again. Myself and Robert Winfree will be doing alternative commentary for Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou.
Not sure how we constitute a band, but we will be doing that.
We're like the two guys playing the acoustic guitar. I've got $30,000 in credit card debt. When they say to pay, I say I can't pay it back. That credit card debt. That's me and you. You can blink help all you want in Morse code. It's not gonna help you.
I was more half waiting for you to reference the Proclaimers, but okay.
No, no, I went straight to Family Guy. Get out of my way, you Asian bitch. Anyway,
Just all the racism on this episode.
hot
Hang on. Actually, as I mentioned that, it occurs to me I have to make a slightly preemptive apology. So when I said that half the budget for a Yentl remake starring Taylor Swift would go to making her nose appropriate.
Yeah, I don't know why you had to fucking bring up Barbra Streisand's nose.
It's just about Barbra Streisand and Taylor Swift in profile next to each other. I promise it's not a shot at the Jewish people.
I didn't want to say anything at the time, but Yentl was not about how big fucking Barbra Streisand's nose was. They just got that actress to do that.
No. The movie Yentl is absolutely... Anytime you hire Barbra Streisand for anything, that's what it becomes about, Mark.
Oh my God.
It's because her nose is big.
Whatever, you anti-Semite.
Dude, hang on. If you do anything with Minnie Driver, you know it's about the size of her head in proportion to her body. It's enormous.
Grosse Point Blank was not about Minnie Driver's head.
Yes, it was.
Nor was Good Will Hunting.
Oh, it absolutely was. Do you think Matt Damon would have done any of that necessary work to fix himself and get right with his own emotional and historical trauma if it hadn't been for her giant head?
When did you turn into me?
When you came on grumpy to this podcast for reasons beyond your control. The mood needed to be lightened, and that's normally your job, but if it has to fall to me, I can do it.
I was plenty light on this show. Sunday.
Yeah, you got there. You're welcome.
Whatever. You know what? Actually, so we re-aired the night that you, me, Jesse, and Ronnie did the alternative commentary for the X-Men game playthrough.
Where the guy has like all four characters and his
where midway through it, you just start venting all your frustrations with me. It's ridiculous. You fucking like by the end of it, first of all, Jesse has the line of the podcast, like it's right at the very end. He's just like, I done shoved a pencil through my eye.
Okay. So everyone understands a little bit why that happened. That was our third recorded podcast of that session. We had we did a podcast, whole podcast. Yeah. Then we watched a video. Then we watched a playthrough of the Simpsons arcade game. Then we did the one of the X-Men, and we were all kind of just done by that point. We were like on hour 5 by that time.
By the end of the funny thing about that one, by the end of it was like Ronnie goes to tell a story, and I guess he had told it on a previous podcast. I'm like, you already told this story, and Ronnie wouldn't fucking let it go for the rest of the show. I played that for my kid on the drive home from choir tonight, and she was dying laughing. She was like, "Wow, passive aggressive much?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that whole night, man." It's funny to go back and listen to it. That we had a lot of fun on there, but there was definitely a lot of just like, no, Mark ruins everyone's fun. Like you're like fucking going nuts on that show. Like I'm just negative. Mark actually ruins people's fun, and I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Poor Jesse.
Yeah, I was not in the best place emotionally at that point in time.
No, clearly not.
My mental health was not great.
So anyway, speaking of mental health, the Metal Hammer of Doom this Sunday is Woods of Ypres, Woods 5, Gray Skies, and Electric Light. That was one Robert Cooper did, I think, which was Jesse. No podcast Monday night. Again, Damn You Hollywood had to move to Wednesday. So Tuesday, we rescheduled The Deuce from 2 weeks ago. So I'd have time to watch it, B, because 2 weeks ago I had a date. So we're going to be doing season 2 on Halloween night because Jesse doesn't do trick-or-treating with his kids on Halloween for some odd reason. They do it on Sunday. Ask him. We have Five Nights at Freddy, and then we have a double shot on Thursday. A rare Thursday where I'm actually going to do a podcast at night. In the daytime, myself and Sean Comer are going to be doing the Red Curtain trilogy. That is Strictly Ballroom, Romeo and Juliet, and Moulin Rouge. This is a Baz Luhrmann director focus. So that's me and Sean Comer.
For the record, Strictly Ballroom, one of my mother's favorite movies.
You've told me.
Right up there with Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
And then Jason Teasley didn't want to do it, but Pat Mullen decided that he would, take over like Rova. So we're going to be doing season 2 of Winning Time. That's next week.
Winning, Mark.
Winning Time.
Winning.
Yes. Wu-Tang. All right. Speaking of the Wu-Tang Clan, who ain't nothing to fuck with, Robert Winfree, show us where you pissed from.
I have about as little to do with the Wu-Tang Clan as is. Like you, I still don't know why you insist on trying to associate me with them.
At this point, you have as much to do with the Wu-Tang Clan as most guys that were in the Wu-Tang Clan.
Well, considering how many people were in the Wu-Tang Clan for one point or another, and then immediately had like one line on one track, and then effed off to just say Wu-Tang Clan, and then do their own like polka music, whatever the. Weird Al should be an honorary member of the Wu-Tang Clan, for the record.
I'm pretty certain he is.
He's not. Fix it. All right, my stuff. So last Saturday, UFC 294. What a clown fiesta!
Was it now?
Would you like the rundown? I can
Sure.
I'll be as brief as I can. So, 12 days out from this event, half of the main event and half of the co-main event fall out. Was supposed to be Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira in a rematch. Was supposed to be Khamzat Chimaev and Paulo Costa. Right? Both good fights.
Mm-hmm.
In the last round of his last sparring session, Charles Oliveira catches a headbutt, splits his eyebrow open. He ain't making the fight. Paulo Costa reveals he had surgery on his elbow 3 weeks ago for an infected bursa sac, and he's still dealing with staph. And he's not able to make it. So we're not off to a great start. Saving the card are Alexander Volkanovski, who steps in on, again, 12 days' notice to fight Makhachev in a rematch of their very competitive first fight. And Kamaru Usman decides, yeah, I'm only on a 2-fight losing streak at welterweight. May as well try my hand at middleweight. And then we get to the actual fights. And somewhat predictably, Makhachev wins in dramatic fashion in the first round because the guy, poor Volkanovski, came off the couch to try and do this. In the co-main event, Khamzat Chimaev has a killer first round and then arguably loses the next two. And the guy who's supposed to be your next middleweight contender looked unbearably pedestrian. So that fell on its face. You had a couple of your featured fight at light heavyweight, Mark's second favorite division, which is a dumpster fire, right? When John Jones left the title, you want a brief history of the title of that division post John Jones?
Dude, we are over 2 hours.
I know. I'll be brief. It goes like this. Jan Blachowicz upsets Dominic Reyes to win it. Jan Blachowicz loses to Old Man Glover Teixeira. Glover Teixeira loses to Yuri Prochazka in one of the craziest fights you'll ever see. Prochazka badly tears his shoulder, relinquishes the belt. It is contested openly between Jamal Hill and Glover Teixeira because everyone else... first fight for the title after that. Vacant title fight, Jan Blachowicz and Magomed Ankalaev, who fight to a split draw. So the next guys up are Jamal Hill and Glover Teixeira. Glover almost wins, and he admitted afterward if he had won, he would have retired right after winning, so that's what I rooted for. Jamal Hill wins, tears his Achilles tendon, vacates the title, and at some point in the next couple of months, we're going to get Jan Blachowicz and Jan Blachowicz and Alex Pereira. This was supposed to crown your theoretical next number one contender between Magomed Ankalaev and Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker takes an illegal knee in the first round. The idiot doctor who screwed up badly in the prelims comes in, asks this guy who is barely conversant in English, what country are you in? And the guy doesn't give an answer that the doctor likes, so the doctor waves the fight off, pissing everybody off. I've never seen Dana White move so fast in his life to get out of his seat cage side into the cage and try to stop these two from continuing to fight each other and every security member. They almost started a riot.
Nice.
Couple of good finishes. On the prelims, I kid you not, every single fight on the prelims had a illegal knee, a fence grab, a glove grab, a groin shot, a bad judging decision, a poor referee performance, or a fighter who admitted after the fact that they were competing with staph. There were 3 of those in a row, by the way, who came to the post-fight presser and said, "Boy, I fought with a staph infection." Dana White's response to this, by the way, "Shut up. If you're going to lie about it, lie about it." Actually, his response to that. Clown fiesta from start to finish. My full report's in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. If you want my more detailed thoughts, I host the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast where I go in detail, including poor Victor Henry, who gets kicked in the groin so badly. Mark, when you used to cover, and we've seen a lot of kicks to the groin in the course of covering MMA and observing it. How many times have you seen a guy not be able to continue after being kicked in the groin?
I mean, it happens, but not a lot.
It happens, but it's rare.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of the worst reactions to getting kicked in the groin I've ever seen. He couldn't continue. They actually had to stop the fight. And the doctor at one point comes in to check on poor Victor Henry, and the doctor saw a sketchy replay where part of the kick landed on the inner thigh and tells Victor Henry, essentially, "You're faking it. You got kicked in the thigh. Get up and fight." And this man, writhing in agony on the ground, has to go, "No, that was all dick and balls." This was picked up by the audio for the broadcast. And, dude, guys, Victor Henry's not a good actor. He got hit low. They took him to the hospital where they had to ultrasound his testicles. And the UFC broadcast had to acknowledge this because this was handled so badly by this quack of a doctor. Because the UFC flew somebody in. There's no actual governing body in the UAE. This was in Abu Dhabi. So the UFC's self-regulating. They're doing whatever the hell they want. And they flew this idiot in who didn't know what he was doing. My brother could have done a better job. One of them. I got 3 of them. Any one of them. So full review of that is on the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. I cover mixed martial arts and professional wrestling for 411mania.com. MLW stuff on Thursday, WWE SmackDown on Friday. There's no UFC event this Saturday, hence Mark and I doing coverage of Ngannou and Fury. If there was a UFC event, I'd be doing that because I get paid for that, and I do this with Mark because I love him.
Uh-uh.
And Mark already mentioned it, but Thursday, TV party for the fall of the House of Usher, the unholy. I can't say the unholy union because WWE's copyrighted that for one of their tag teams and they'll squash us like bugs. But Jason, Alexis, and I are the unholy trinity. So the unholy tetralogy, if we throw in Dorian, we'll see. But tune in for that. I'm enjoying it so far. Flanagan is predictably up and down. It's good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. His last thing was bad, so this is pretty good so far. See how it concludes, but doing it thus far. Tune in for that review, and yeah, next week on a Wednesday.
Yes, we'll be so far into the week, the money won't matter anymore, but that's okay. Whatever makes you guys happy. Not that Alexis does a great job of the money as it is. So,
in fairness, Mark, you set a very high standard.
Well, thanks. All right. Well, thank you, folks, for listening to our very extended review of Killers of the Flower Moon. See, folks, we do like stuff.
Hey. Here's the other thing, people. We had a show that didn't go as long as the movie. You want to vamp for another 40 minutes? We can do it.
Be well, be safe, and behave.